I was laying out the fresh lilies when I heard it, the sentence that undid 10 years of vows as easily as a ribbon cut with kitchen scissors. My husband said, "That fat woman disgusts me." If you've ever had a moment like that, when the air turns thin and the room tilts, please stay with me. Like the story, subscribe for more, share this with someone who needs strength today, and tell me in the comments if you've ever swallowed pain to keep the peace. Your support means more than you know. The lilies had been my idea. They made the dining room glow like a small chapel. Their scent was sweet but not overbearing, a clean little hymn of a fragrance. I just placed a white plate at the head of the table, the seat I'd ironed the linen for, when his voice, low and careless, slid through the hall. He was on the phone, I realized, the way he always spoke when he thought he was safe, words softened by distance, hard truths buffered by someone else's ear. I stood as still as the lilies, while the world inside me cracked into 1,000 careful pieces. If you had entered our home that night, you would have seen nothing wrong. The candles were ready to be lit, the lasagna was resting beneath foil like a secret. My husband's tie was draped over the back of a chair, the burgundy one I bought during a sale he pretended not to notice. The overhead light hummed softly, and a spring rain tapped the windows with gentle fingers. Calm isn't the same as peace. Calm is just what a room looks like before the quake. I didn't let myself cry. Crying seemed too loud, too obvious, as if tears would confess to a crime I hadn't committed. Instead, I rearranged forks and napkins for the third time, wiped a clean counter, and smoothed the runner across the table's spine as if touch could fix what language had shattered. His voice drifted from the study in fragments, laughter, the drag of a sigh, a pause long enough to be a shrug. The words replayed anyway, that ugly little sentence, sharp as a pin pressed against a bruise. The first time you hear disgust in the mouth that promised to love you, something goes winter inside your chest. People would say you should have marched in there. Maybe you would have. I can imagine it now, the door flung wide, my chin high, a righteous inventory spilling from my lips. The lunches packed, the commutes shared, the late night budgeting, the years of cheering for his promotions and patching the thin places in our life so he never fell through. But what I did was the opposite. I pretended I'd heard nothing. I set out with a hostess's smile my face didn't feel. I asked about his day when he finally wandered in, brushing my shoulder with a kiss more like a signature than affection. He smelled like his new cologne, the one the salesgirl had called bold. Bolder than honesty, I thought. He was charming, of course. He had learned it as a language, a fluency that softened meetings and smoothed dinners. "You look nice," he said, not quite meeting my eyes, and I wondered who nice was meant for me or the imaginary audience where he performed husbandhood for applause. I nodded and slid him a plate. The lasagna was perfect, which irritated me. Food should fail when your heart does. But he ate with pleasure and told me a funny story about a client, and I completed my half of our duet. The right laughs at the right beats, a slip of my hand to pour more wine, a gentle question about his sister's new apartment. The performance was flawless. Disaster often is. It's strange what you notice when you're pretending not to bleed. The way the rain grew heavier, stamping little silver coins across the dark patio. The faint ache in my feet from a pair of shoes I wore because I liked how they made my calves look, those same calves I had once hated in the mirror, then learned to love as they carried me up mountains of small daily work. The lilies watching from their vase like pale witnesses. Somewhere above us, the heater kicked on with a sigh I wanted to echo. After dinner, he went back to the study for emails, and I stood at the sink washing plates already clean. I pressed my palm against the cool curve of porcelain and tried to decide which story I wanted to live in. There's the story where I confront him and demand an apology that is specific and real. There's the story where I pretend it was a misunderstanding and let him tuck me into bed with the same hands that typed words he would never say out loud. And there's the story where I choose myself so quietly the house doesn't realize I'm leaving until the door clicks shut. That moment at the sink was a little rehearsal for each ending. I didn't know yet which one I'd choose. Memory is never neutral, it curates. It highlights and hushes, polishes and hides. But as the night folded itself into our house, my memory began unthreading a longer pattern, small scenes I'd placed on a shelf and dusted around. The way he corrected me in front of friends, using humor like a glove to make it palatable. The time he joked about me skipping dessert. The faint, bored look that crossed his face when I talked about my new project at work. The way his compliments often included an edit. "You look great, but maybe that dress. You know, we could try shopping somewhere with better tailoring." I had swallowed those moments because he was kind in other ways, because he paid the car note on time, because he called my mother on her birthday and made her laugh. I told myself that kindness is the sum, not the parts. I told myself that love is a ledger that eventually balances, but ledgers can hide thefts if you don't look closely. When he finally came to bed, he brought with him the glow of his phone, a little square of daylight in the dark. He set it face down on the nightstand, always face down, and draped an arm over my waist with the practiced heaviness of a good night scene. My body went obediently still, but the mind that lay inside it was awake and unwinding. His breathing became deep and regular. I watched the ceiling and counted slow seconds until courage arrived in a small, practical form, a checklist. I thought of tomorrow and the day after. I thought of the promise I'd made to myself at 19 when I swore I'd never again be the girl who shrinks to fit someone else's comfort. I thought of the body he had named with disgust, This body that learned to cook after we married, that carried 2 jobs for a year to cover a bad quarter, that survived grief when we buried my father, that learned how to dance again in a living room after midnight alone because sometimes you must teach joy how to return. My body is not an apology, it is not a punchline. It is a home I keep cleaning and decorating and expanding, the only one I get to live in until the end. The anger that arrived surprised me, it wasn't a firestorm, it was a steady pilot light. It warmed me without smoke. In the morning, I did not wake him. I brewed coffee the way he likes and left it on the counter anyway. Habit is the last rope to loosen. I packed his lunch with small efficiencies, and then, as the kettle clicked off, I made a decision that felt simultaneously reckless and inevitable. I would pretend again for one more day, not because I was afraid of conflict, but because silence would help me listen. People tell on themselves if you let the room be quiet. If there was a rot beneath the floorboards of our marriage, I wanted to follow the sound until I found the softest plank. When he left, there was a brief, careful kiss, his lips cool from toothpaste. The hallway smelled like his cologne and rain and something else, something metallic and thin. I decided to call for warning. I waited by the window until his car disappeared, then I exhaled a breath that felt like it had been waiting 10 years to leave. The house looked different without him inside it, as if it had shifted to center me. I didn't call my best friend. I didn't post a graceful quote about self-worth and wait for the affirming chorus. Instead, I did something old-fashioned and slightly shameful. I cleaned. I scrubbed the sink until it shone, stripped the bed, swept the corners where dust likes to play house. Movement steadied my hands, gave my mind a chore to match. When the room smelled like lemon and the windows looked like water, I sat at the dining table, the scene of last night's performance, and opened my notebook. On the first page, I wrote a sentence I could live inside. I deserve a love that does not require me to become invisible. The doorbell startled me at noon. I didn't expect anyone. I'm not the kind of woman who receives lunchtime visits without warning. On the porch stood our neighbor, Mrs., with her little brown dog tucked under one arm like a loaf. Her lipstick was the color of raspberries, her eyes looked like someone who has seen a few storms and doesn't run from the rain anymore. "I brought you the mail," she said brightly. "It was in my box by mistake." She handed me a small stack, circulars, a bill, a cream envelope with my husband's name in a looping hand I didn't recognize. The return address had no name, just the city where his firm sometimes sent him for conferences. "Thank you," I said, and she tilted her head, considering me the way gardeners consider a plant they know is thirsty. "You're okay?" she asked. "I will be," I said. It came out steadier than I felt. After she left, I stood with the envelope like it was ticking. I didn't open it, not yet. I set it on the table where the lilies watched and texted my husband a simple message. "How's your day?" 3 dots bounced, then disappeared. When his reply arrived, it was a photo of a conference room, the caption busy. "See you tonight." Like anyone else, I could admire the staging, crisp shirts, a whiteboard with important scribbles, a coffee cup strategically placed for. I looked at the photo for a long time, then at the envelope, then back at the photo again, as if the room in the image might confess to the letter on my table. The next day, something would happen that would make the lilies look like a warning I ignored. But for now, in the hush between a sentence that bruised me and a truth that would change my life, I did what women do when they are tired of pretending to be small. I sat in my own house and waited for the sound of my voice returning. The letter sat on the dining table all night, a pale little secret in a cream envelope. By morning, its edges had curled like it was tired of being polite. I told myself I wouldn't touch it, but the human heart is just a room full of unlocked drawers. When I finally slid it open, the paper smelled faintly of hotel air conditioning, dry, recycled, expensive. Inside was a receipt for a jewelry store, one I'd never heard of, and a folded note. "For you, darling, you deserve the sparkle. M." My husband's name is M. I laughed, a short, startled sound that hit the walls and came back empty. People think betrayal announces itself with thunder. It doesn't. It arrives in neat handwriting and perfect grammar. He texted mid-morning, "Don't forget we have dinner with the Andersons tonight." I typed "sure, I'll look nice," and pressed send before my shaking thumb could change its mind. When he came home, he kissed my cheek, talked about traffic, and left his phone on the counter while he went to shower. Steam curled under the bathroom door. I could hear the familiar melody of him humming. I should have walked away. Instead, I picked up the phone. The screen unlocked with a lazy swipe, no passcode, almost arrogant. The message thread was right there, pinned to the top. Her name was Melissa, their conversation scrolled like a movie script I never auditioned for. Hotel reservations, secret emojis, words I'd once begged him to say when we were still new. My fingers went cold, but my mind was terribly calm. Each message was a bead. Together, they made a rosary of deceit. I read until my eyes blurred, until I reached last night's text. She was wearing that awful dress again. I can't stand looking at her. Tomorrow, lunch at the usual. I put the phone down so gently you'd think it was glass. The shower stopped. I turned to the sink, pretended to rinse a cup. He came out, toweling his hair, humming still. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Yes," I said. My voice sounded borrowed. Dinner with the Andersons was pleasant. I wore a red dress. He once called too bold and smiled until my cheeks trembled. He held my hand across the table, the perfect husband, and every squeeze felt like punctuation in a sentence I no longer believed. That night I didn't sleep. I watched him instead, his chest rising, the small scar near his temple from a childhood fall, the man I thought I knew. Betrayal isn't a single event, it's the echo that follows you through every room. By dawn, a strange peace replaced the shaking. I understood something vital. He had already left me in his heart. All that remained was the performance. I could end the play whenever I chose. I brewed coffee again, same ritual, but this time I didn't pour him a cup. I opened my laptop and began to write not a message to him, but a letter to myself. A list of everything I'd forgotten I was capable of. Laughter without permission, walking without waiting, loving without shrinking. When he finally stumbled into the kitchen, half awake, he frowned at the single mug. No coffee for me. I thought you didn't like anything bitter, I said. He didn't catch it. He never did. The next morning, sunlight came in as though it hadn't been warned. It spilled across the kitchen tiles, bright and careless, painting over last night's thoughts. My husband sat at the table, scrolling through his phone, spoon clinking against the bowl like nothing in our world had cracked. That, I realized, was his secret talent. He could live inside denial like it was a well-furnished home. I had spent the night replaying the messages in my mind, their rhythm almost like poetry, only that fat woman disgusts me. The phrase beat like a drum under everything I did, brushing my teeth, folding laundry, staring at my reflection. Every syllable was a small theft, but the woman in the mirror this morning wasn't broken, she was rearranged. I'd called my lawyer before sunrise, not a lawyer, our lawyer, the one who handled our mortgage, our wills, our tidy shared life. When I asked if she could stop by that afternoon to go over some revisions, she didn't ask questions. Maybe my voice told her enough. At noon, I heard his laughter through the phone again, that low, flattering tone reserved for someone who wasn't me. I didn't eavesdrop this time. I didn't need to. Instead, I set the table for two, not dinner this time, but paperwork. Neat stacks of documents, highlighter marks like quiet verdicts. When the doorbell rang, he answered it, still in that easy charm that could fool anyone who hadn't read his messages. Mrs. Collins, he greeted her, eyebrows lifting in surprise. Did we have something scheduled? She smiled in that professional way lawyers do when they know the truth but have promised silence. Yes, I'm here at your wife's request. It won't take long. He looked at me then, confusion starting to collect behind his eyes. What's this about? Just a few changes, I said. To the will, the house deed, and our joint accounts. I smiled back, the same polite curve of lips I'd practiced for years. He laughed, sharp and uncertain. You're joking. Mrs. Collins unfolded the top document. These authorize separation of assets and a temporary living arrangement while proceedings continue, she said, her voice calm, steady, as though reading a weather report. His face went pale. Proceedings? What proceedings? I looked straight at him, no tremor left, the ones where we stopped pretending. He stared, waiting for the anger, the tears, the begging. He didn't recognize silence as power. You're overreacting, he said finally. You always twist things. I saw the messages, Daniel. The name landed between us like a door slamming shut. I saw everything, Melissa, the hotel, the jewelry, and I heard what you said about me. I just didn't realize the disgust went both ways. He opened his mouth, but Mrs. Collins cleared her throat softly. Mr. and Mrs. Whitman, she said, if you'd like to review the terms. No need, I said. He can keep what he's already chosen. He looked smaller then, his confidence folding in on itself. So that's it. Yes, I said, that's it. Mrs. Collins gathered the papers into a folder. I'll leave you both to sign at your convenience, she said, and left, heels tapping like punctuation marks down the hall. When the door shut, he sank into a chair. For a long while, neither of us spoke. The air between us was too full of everything we'd never said. Finally, he muttered, you could have talked to me first. I did, Daniel, for years. You just stopped listening. He ran a hand through his hair, the gesture of a man searching for the version of himself he thought existed. I didn't mean it, he whispered. You know how I am when I talk to friends. I was frustrated. Then why the jewelry, the hotel, the woman? He looked down, no answer came. Outside, rain began again, soft and insistent, as though the sky had joined the conversation. I stood, collecting the papers and the pen. You don't have to sign now, I said, but you will, because you've already decided who I am in your story. I'm just choosing to write my own ending. As I turned to leave the room, he said, almost childlike, so what happens now? I paused at the doorway. Now you live with the truth you built, and I start learning what peace sounds like. The day after he left, silence returned like an old friend who had been waiting patiently outside my door. It didn't ache the way I expected. It hummed, a low, steady sound of space being reclaimed. For the first time in years, the air in our house belonged entirely to me. I walked through each room like an archaeologist, discovering the ruins of a life I'd built with careful hands. His mug still sat on the counter, the handle turned the way he liked. The closet held his suits, lined up like obedient soldiers waiting for orders. There was no grand drama in his departure, no slammed doors, no shouted words. He simply packed his essentials, mumbled something about needing time, and disappeared into the rainy afternoon. I made tea and sat by the window. The street was slick, puddles catching tiny reflections of the world, cars, clouds, bits of sky. I wondered if he was somewhere watching the same rain, realizing too late that the woman he'd reduced to an insult was also the woman who had once saved him from his own loneliness. But pity, I discovered, is a luxury you can't afford when you're rebuilding yourself. The first few nights were strange. The bed was too wide. The shadows moved differently without the rhythm of another body beside me. Yet in that emptiness, I began to recognize something familiar, the pulse of my own life. I cooked what I liked without worrying about calories or judgment. I played old music and danced barefoot on the cold kitchen tiles, the same ones that once held the shards of my dignity. I even laughed, sharp and honest, when I burned toast and set off the smoke alarm. A week later, Mrs. came by again, her little dog in tow. "You seem lighter," she said, setting down a basket of lemon muffins. "I am," I replied. "It turns out heartbreak weighs less than pretending." She smiled knowingly. "Good, keep walking forward, don't turn around until you can laugh at the view." Her words stayed with me. Days turned into a rhythm of healing, small, ordinary victories, fixing the leaky faucet by myself, repainting the dining room a soft shade of sage, deleting old photos one by one without crying. I learned that strength isn't a roar, it's the whisper that says you can keep going even when no one is watching. The papers came back signed a month later. There was no message, no apology, just a courier's envelope, neat and impersonal. I placed it on the same table where the lilies had once stood, where the first crack had opened between us. I signed my name and sealed it, the final act of a play I no longer wished to perform. That night I took a walk. The air smelled of rain and soil, and somewhere children were laughing, loud, uninhibited, alive. I tilted my face toward the sky, letting cool drops slide down my cheeks. They tasted like closure. In that moment, I understood something I wish I'd known years ago. Love should never make you disappear. If someone looks at you and sees something to fix, to shrink, to mock, walk away. The right people will see your softness as strength, your body as home, your silence as sacred. Now, when I look in the mirror, I don't hear his voice anymore. I hear mine, strong, clear, unapologetic. If you're listening to this and you've ever been made to feel small, please remember, you are not the reflection of someone else's cruelty. You are the whole mirror. You are enough exactly as you are. Like this story, subscribe and share it with someone who might need a reminder that healing isn't loud, it's just consistent. And tell me in the comments, what was the moment you finally chose yourself? Because for me, it was the morning I realized I didn't need revenge. I just needed peace, and peace finally was choosing me.